to Shattering Myths. Yahowah, which is God's one and only name, an easy name to pronounce for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. It's comprised of Yod, He, Wah, He. There's 4 letters in his name, 2 of which are repeated. The letters are all vowels. There are 5 vowels amongst the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. You can be easily led astray and believe, as the Masoretes would and rabbis would have you believe, that Hebrew was a consonant-only language and that it could only be pronounced when the Masoretes vocalized the text with their diacritical marks. But to believe that, you would have to be ignorant or irrational and ignore all of the evidence and being able to process it. Because even amongst their 22 letters, the so-called scholars would claim that 2 of them are silent letters. The Aleph, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and the Ain. They would claim those are silent letters. Now, why even have a silent letter? And obviously, everything that's in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms is a recording of, a witness to, the spoken word. Yahweh spoke to his prophets, Yahweh spoke to Moshe, and Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and the prophets, after listening to what Yahweh had to say, conveyed what he had to say to the children of Israel and to the world through them. And so all of the words are a reporting of conversations, and therefore it would have been impossible for them to report what was said if the language didn't have both consonants and vowels. And it, of course, did. All you have to do is look at the thousands of words that appear in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and you find that even without the diacritical marks, you can pronounce all of them, recognizing that 5 of the 22 letters are vowels. And of those, the Yod, the He, and the Wah are all vowels. The Wah, just like the English W, is very often pronounced either as an O or a double U, thus the name of the letter. Look in any English dictionary of all of the words that are OW, where the O sound is actually a legacy of the Wah. One of the great illustrators of this point is the most commonly repeated Hebrew word, shalom. The O sound in shalom is from the Hebrew Wah. Look it up for yourself. One of the most well-known Hebrew words is Torah. The O sound in Torah is from the Hebrew Wah. Most people are familiar with the idea of goy and goyim being non-Jews, and the O sound is from the Hebrew Wah. Elohim is the plural version of Elohah, and Elohah is the Hebrew word for the title God. It generates its O sound from the Hebrew Wah. There's no one that disputes that the Y is a vowel. It's the basis of Yisrael. It's the basis of literally thousands of words, including Yahweh and Yahusha's name that begin with the letter Y, which leaves only the He, and 99% of the time that a He appears in the Hebrew lexicon, it is pronounced Ah, as it is in the very basis for Yahweh's name, according to him, as he introduced himself to Moshe. He told us that his name was based on the Hebrew verb Hayah, Hayah, and therefore every letter in Yahweh's name is pronounceable. To believe that no one knows how to pronounce it, that it's too sacred to be pronounced, you just have to be ignorant and irrational. And if you think that you are somehow enlightened because you believe the first scholarly source you stumble upon when they say otherwise, and you don't bother to validate what you are seeing, then you've lost the ability to think. So here is the text of the first introduction of Suka shelters. It reads, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe," a name that means to draw out. That's what God is doing with Moshe. He's drawing us away from religion and politics, from economic schemes, and from militarism, to being played for fools, to have others make merchandise of men. He does not like that. He doesn't like religious communities political cultures, militaristic cultures, or people being enslaved. So Yahweh spoke to Moshe, the one who draws out, for the purpose of saying, to declare a promise, converse, use words to talk together and communicate with the children of Yisrael. Yisrael means individuals, from Yish, Sarah, who engage and endure, with El, God. To say, on the 15th day of the 7th month is the festival feast of Suka, of shelters. It is a chog, Suka. Chog means a coming together to celebrate, a party, a time of merriment, of eating, of dancing, of singing, of just enjoying one another's company. So this is a celebratory time on the 15th day of the 7th month, called shelters. Yesterday was the first day of Suka. And he says that it's a celebration. Now, this is the 7th of 7 of these celebrations, one occurring in the 7th month, and he says that it's going to last for 7 days, all to approach and in proximity and in association with Yahowah, La Yahowah. For those who would say that Yahweh doesn't emphasize 7, that there's no way to understand Yahweh's plan, his timetable, or his ultimate desire, they would have to be totally ignorant of Yahweh's fixation on 7. Everything with Yahweh is 6 plus 1 equals 7. Man, in addition to God, equals the desired result. This is a constant emphasis of 7, the 7th month, the 7 days. This is the 7th of 7 Moed Mikre. He's repeating this because he wants us to pay attention to the importance of 7. There were 7 days of creation. Yahweh then said that he created the universe during 6 days so that on the 7th day he could rest. Man was created on the 6th day by the one and only God. 6 plus 1 equals 7. Suka shelters, therefore, is the living embodiment of the Shabbat. We work 6 days. On the 7th day, we rest and reflect on Yahweh, on his plan. We engage and answer 6 invitations to walk to God, to be able to enter his home, perfected, immortal, empowered, enriched, adopted, speaking with authority regarding his plan, our relationship reconciled, so that on the 7th day we can camp out with him for 7 days, with an 8th day added to emphasize that this is the plan for all eternity. Whether it be the creation account, the first proclamation of the Shabbat and why the 7th day was so important, or the realization that Suka is the living enactment of the 7th day. From a historical point of view, this time with Yahweh, for Yahweh to approach, for us to approach Yahweh, is emblazoned in the concept of the millennial Shabbat, the 1,000-year celebration of Sukkah, that will begin in year 6,000 Yah and continue through year 7,000 Yah. Year 6,000 Yah begins on Pesach, or actually 14 days before Pesach, 2 sevens before Pesach in 2033. But the celebration of the millennial Shabbat will, in year 6,000 Yah, will commence 2033 on our pagan calendars, but on a Shabbat, the 7th day of October in 2033. This is the timing that Yahweh has provided, that we might know that over the 6,000 years, we have lived outside of the garden, the enclosure of Eden, of great joy. But that shelters represents the ultimate enclosure with God, and that on the seventh day we return to God. That we return and are able to camp out with Him. We are going to be living in Eden, those of us who have been adopted into His covenant family. And that is what Suka is telling us, that there will be a 1,000-year celebration, the seventh day, a 1,000-year celebration of living with God, of God living with us on this planet. This is what Suka represents. It is our journey home. Suka is living with Yahowah in His home, in Jerusalem, in Yisrael, on this planet for 1,000 years as a living enactment of Suka and the Shabbat, a celebration of everything seven represents. It's amazing that so few people recognize this. Also, let's be clear, this is Yahowah speaking. Nothing man says can contradict God. Therefore, if you are celebrating Christmas instead, or Halloween instead of Sukkah, you're in contradiction with God. You're in discord with Him. Nothing the church imposes, nothing a pastor or priest or pope says, nothing a president or a academician says can trump the words of God, can have more authority than God. This is Yahowah speaking to all of us. If you don't want to listen to Him, if you don't want to trust Him, if you don't want to rely on Him, if you don't want to listen to Him, that is your choice. But do not pretend that some religion can contradict the words of God and establish as divine some other alternative. This instruction, this guidance, this invitation to participate in Sukkah came from God Himself. Deal with it one way or another. Also, this is a celebration of 7 days, a festival feast to approach and to be in proximity with Yahowah. It has nothing to do with Jew or Jewish, contrary to what is professed by Christianity and Islam. On the first and foremost day, there is a set apart, a kodesh, a special invitation to be called out and to meet, to encounter God during an assembly designed for reading and reciting. This mikra, kodesh mikra, is from kara, to call out and to welcome, to invite and to summon, to read and recite, to meet and to encounter. Why is it? This is from kara, called out, Leviticus 23:35. Why is it that anyone in their right mind would discount the word of the Creator of the universe and not answer His invitation to be called out and to meet on this day? Why would you say, no, I don't want to meet with God, and yet claim to be religious? Why would you say, no, I don't want to listen to God, and claim to be religious? Why would you say that God's word has no effect, it's null and void, it's meaningless to me, and claim to be in a religion tied to the very Torah that introduced Abraham and the covenant to us? Why would you do that? I mean, how could you be a bigger hypocrite than pretending to be religious, acting religious, and discounting the very word of God, ignoring His invitation to meet? Sobering, isn't it? So when we mock religion, expose and condemn religion, this is the reason why. You have to be either ignorant or irrational to claim to have a relationship with God, to claim to be saved by a God that you don't listen to, whose invitation you don't heed. He says you should not engage in, pursue, or profit from any of the work of the heavenly messenger, the Malaka, on this day. Malaka is the feminine of Malak. It's a spiritual messenger. The only feminine aspect of Yahowah's message conveyed in a spiritual form is the set-apart spirit. She is maternal. She does all of the things that are important to us spiritually. It's why Yosha, when speaking with Nicodemus, spoke of a birth by water, something we celebrated yesterday with the arrival of our granddaughter, and a birth by spirit, where those who have accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant are born spiritually into Yahowah's family, all by answering these invitations to meet with God. For 7 days, it says, approach and come near, the maternal manifestation of the fiery light, to approach Yahowah. For 7 days, in the 7th month, during the 7th of 7 Mikra, approach and come near, Karab. Join closely together, come into the midst of, appear before. The Ish. Ish is individual with the at the end of it. It becomes feminine. Ish is also the Hebrew word for fiery light. With an and a hey at the end of it, it becomes a feminine light. So come into the maternal manifestation of the light, the adoptive mother who purifies, enlightens, and elevates unto Yahowah. This is how we are covered. Remember, Eden is a covered garden. Yahowah wants to cover us in light. And so on this day, on Suka, which is a shelter, a covering, we are covered in the set-apart Spirit's light, just as the Ark of the Covenant was sheltered and covered in the tent of the witness. All of these things are related. They're visual aids, if you will, to understanding what's being offered. Then he says, on the 8th day, there exists a set-apart invitation to meet on your behalf, and you shall answer and respond to the summons, and present yourself before the adoptive mother who purifies, enlightens, and elevates unto Yahowah. 7 days, and then he says there's an 8th day. Now, if he could just say there's 8 days, but if he did that, he wouldn't be emphasizing that this is the 7th Moed Mikra in the 7th month that we celebrate for a Shabbat of times for 7 days. And he would not have made it clear that there's a reason that the 8th day is also a set-apart day, as is the first day. And the reason that the 8th day is a set-apart day is Kodesh. And the reason that on this 8th day we come near and approach, enveloped in the fiery light of our spiritual mother, is because it is her garment of light. It's being born anew from above in the set-apart spirit that we become immortal. 8 represents eternity, just as it represents infinity. Now, there's another reason that the 7 and the 8 were separated, where Yahowah said that there are 7 days. It says for 7 days, and this is now the 7th of these 7 Moed Mikra in the 7th month. And we are at the 15th day, which is 2 7s plus 1. That he says, for 7 days approach and come near the maternal manifestation of the light of Yahowah. That would be approach the set-apart spirit. And so then he says, on the 8th day, there exists a set-apart day on your behalf. And you should answer the summons and invitation and respond and appear before the adoptive mother who purifies, enlightens, and elevates the Yahowah. The reason it's broken down that way is that the 7 days represents the 7th era of human history, the last 1,000 years among the 7,000 that the earth will exist, this universe will exist. Now, this universe from the perspective of the Creator at creation took 6 days to create, which is 14 to 15 billion years. Looking back from our perspective, that's all based on relativity. If you're interested in the math of that, read the first 4 or 5 chapters of Yahowah.com. And we deal then with that from the time of man when Adam was booted out of the garden. That occurred just 18 years shy of 6,000 years ago. That occurred on year 0. So that 1,000 years later, we have the flood and the first enactment of the covenant with Noah and his family, designed to provide us with a visual portrait of what the covenant was all about. And Yahowah and our role relative to that relationship. And we both have roles where God provides the instruction, and those who listen to him and respond benefit and are saved. That's the exact same nature of the covenant that was formed with Abraham. And so in year 1,000, we have the flood, demonstrating the purpose of the covenant and our role. We have to listen to God and act upon his instructions. Then in year 2000, which is 40 Yobel, which is Yobel is a marker of time of 7 times 7 plus 1. It denotes the time where all slaves are freed, we are liberated, all debts are forgiven, we are made perfect, and 3, that we return home, that the land returns to God, that we return to his home. And so 40 Yobel, 40 is the number for a time of testing that is consistent throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. For example, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The children of Israel were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. It took 40 years to cross the wilderness before entry into the Promised Land. Yahshua was tested 40 days and 40 nights by Hasatan. 40 is a time of a period of testing. 40 Yobel, which is the years where Yahowah saves us, frees us from human institutionalized bondage and forgives us, returns us to his home. So 40 times the Yobel is 2,000 years. 2,000 years after Adam and Chawah were booted out of the Garden of Eden, of a perfect environment where there was no religion, there was no politics, into a world of religion and politics. 2,000 years thereafter, the means to return was presented by Yahowah to Abraham, and Abraham became the individual that represented the first to engage in a covenant relationship, a family relationship with God. Everything you need to know about the covenant is presented in the first book of the Torah, in Bereshit, Genesis, as God describes the conditions for participating in the covenant with Abraham, and then also presents the benefits of the covenant with Abraham. Everything you need to know about the covenant, about coming to know who God is, what he wants, what he's offering, and how we capitalize upon it, and what the benefits are if we choose to participate, are all outlined therein. And so we have in that presentation the means to engage in a relationship with Yahowah. That is presented in year 2000 and actually affirmed on Mount Moriah. So that 40 Yobel thereafter, Yahshua then becomes the promised sacrificial lamb that was discussed in the ratification of the covenant with Abraham 2,000 years or 40 Yobel prior. And he then fulfilled, along with the set-apart spirit, the first 4 Moed Mikre. Pesach, Matzah, B'Purim, and Shavuot. We were made immortal. We were perfected. We were adopted into God's family, and we were enriched and empowered by him. Now, that's not all humankind. It's a tiny, tiny percentage of humankind. On average, 1 in a million individuals who have availed themselves of what God is offering because they listened to him. They trusted Yahowah as opposed to some man-made religion. And so here we have the means to engage in a relationship and to come home, affirmed at 40 Yobel, year 2000 and then enabled with all 5 of the benefits of the covenant, enabled with the fulfillment of those first 4 Moed Mikre in year 4000 exactly as the Genesis account tells us that on the fourth day, the greater light, Yahowah, via Yosha, would become visible to us as a sign for the meetings, the Moed Mikre. So then, 40 Yobel thereafter, 40 Yobel from what occurred on our pagan calendars in 33 CE is 2033. That's year 6000 Yah. That is when this 1,000-year celebration of Suka will commence. And of course, Suka in year 6000 Yah in 2033, it's a Shabbat. It begins on a Friday evening at sunset and continues through the Saturday because it is a celebration of the Shabbat. And all those who are members of the covenant, who have engaged in this relationship with God, who have listened to what God is offering and instructing, will spend the next 1,000 years with Him on this planet, as camping out with Him, enjoying earth reformed in the conditions found in Eden. That means there will be no religion, there will be no politics, there will be no human institutions of any kind. Those of us who have engaged in the covenant will have the opportunity to spend, 1,000 years camping out with God and enjoying this planet as marvelous as it can be made, perfected just as Eden was perfected when we got to live man, the first man, with God. So that is what this day is all about. Now, the eighth day, I said that it was presented as 7 plus 1. So for 1,000 years, completing year 6,000 Yah to 7,000 Yah, 2033 to 3033 on the pagan calendar, although the pagan calendar will no longer be referred to. So after 2033, there'll be no reference to a pagan calendar. It will be year 6,000 Yah and then 6001 all the way up to 7,000 Yah. Just prior to 7,000 Yah, Hasatan will be released. Everyone that was born during the millennial Shabbat on earth will have the same opportunity we have all had to either choose God or to reject Him, to ignore Him or to embrace Him. And after that time, he will be locked up, as will be all of those who embraced Hasatan, all religious and political leaders. And they will be forever incarcerated as those who have chosen to engage in the covenant will have the opportunity to live with Yahowah forever, camping out with Him. Now, the eighth day, then, is synonymous with, is illustrative of the time after year 7,000 Yah, because at that point, time simply becomes eternal. There's no longer a measurement of time. We become entirely spiritual beings. Time is an irrelevant aspect of our lives. Time simply exists. Time for us will be as it is with God. The past, the present, the future will all be as if they were one and the same. We will not only be able to travel in time, but travel the vast dimensions of a universe that will actually be created as we are witnesses. Yahowah will create a new universe on this eighth day that will last for an eternity, just so that we can enjoy the creation experience, so we can be there with Him, so we can question Him, so that we can engage in conversation with Him, so we can celebrate the aspects of creation and the conception of life. This is what awaits us. This is what is presented in these words. This then goes on to reemphasize something that is extremely important, and we're now sharing from what is the book of Kata in the midst of the Torah. Torah means teaching and guidance. Kata means to be invited, to be called out and to meet, to read and recite, corrupted for some ungodly reason to Leviticus 23:26. Her joyous assembly of people does not engage in any of the work of the heavenly messenger. Her joyous assembly of people, these are those who were brought together by the set-apart Spirit, our spiritual mother. And we do not engage in anything that is part of her responsibility. She clothes us. We should not be adorning ourselves in fancy garments like popes and rabbis and all the other religious idiots do. We should not be pretending that we can forgive, as Roman Catholics do through their confessions. That is her business. We should not pretend that we can cause somebody to be born anew spiritually, as is the case with evangelical Christianity and with the Roman Catholic Church claiming to have the keys to heaven. Being allowed into God's home, becoming immortal, becoming perfected by God, being adopted into his family, being enriched and empowered by God is God's business. That's the promise he has made as part of his covenant. And therefore, we ought to avoid trying to compete with God in any of these arenas. We, yes, can enrich people, but only if we do so by citing Yahowah's testimony. We can empower people, but only if we do so by sharing Yahowah's means to empowerment. We can lead people towards eternal life by encouraging them to meet with Yahowah on Passover and explaining the purpose of Passover. But we must never suggest that it is our prayer or our words that cause this to happen. The conclusion of what we now label as Leviticus 23:37, who knows why. I only refer to these things by their, I put in air quotes, verse number, because I want people who are reading them or listening to them to have the opportunity to validate these things for themselves. I put in all of the Hebrew words transliterated so you can look them up and designate where they are coming from within the Torah by these verse designations, only so that you can look them up and verify them. Understand that the Torah doesn't have chapter and verses. And it doesn't because chapter and verses are really dangerous if they're used for anything other than for someone to look these things up and verify them for themselves. They have no other value. Because if you cite something as a part of a verse or think that you're doing something appropriately by quoting a verse, you're always taking something out of context. And the moment you take it out of context, you've lost the primary keys to understanding. You've just tossed them aside. Pauline doctrine, Christianity, is based solely on this notion of taking things out of context. This idea that there's a new covenant from Jeremiah. Well, if you read in context, you realize it ain't with the Gentile church. B, it hasn't occurred yet. And C, that it will occur as a result of a wholesale integration of the Torah into our very natures. So in context, it destroys Christianity. Out of context, it can be used, portions of it can be used to create validity for Christianity. So that's why context is everything. But anyway, this is Kara, the called out. And it says, these godly and specific, Elah, appointed and designated meeting times, Moed, are of Yahowah, to approach Yahowah. So Eliah tells you that Yahowah's name has appeared here now 5 times. Yahowah is telling you that this is all about meeting with him. This is all about his plan. To relegate these meetings to something that is Jewish, and why are you doing it if you're not Jewish, is being wholly and completely ignorant. It's being wholly and completely irrational. It is being religious. It is to say that I am incapable of reading the evidence for myself. I have no interest in hearing what God has to say. And even if I were to read it, I'm not going to accept it because I prefer the religions of men, even when the religions of men are wholly contrary to the Word of God. But God himself is saying that these days are specific, they're appointed, they're designated meeting times. That's what Moed means. The 4th day of creation was specifically set as a sign for the Moed. What happened on the 4th day of human history, with a day equaling 1,000 years? It was year 4000, 33 CE. The first 4 of these Moed were fulfilled by Yosha. 4 were fulfilled in year 4000 Yah, just as he predicted the Moed would be seen as a sign in the 4th millennia of humankind. These are appointed by God himself. They're designated as times to meet by Yahowah. Leviticus 23:37. This concludes with these godly and specific, appointed and designated meeting times of Yahowah, which relationally, asher, and beneficially, you are invited to attend Kara. You are called out with the opportunity to read and recite accordingly as set apart mikre, as Kara is the basis of mikre, as invitations to be called out, to meet, and to encounter each other. That means to not only meet one another, but also to encounter and be welcomed by God for reading and reciting for the purpose of coming near and approaching Karab, for answering the invitation and presenting oneself before the adoptive mother who enlightens and elevates, the Isha, the maternal manifestation of Yahweh's fiery light, to approach law on behalf of and according to Yahowah. This is his gift, a mincha, a present, something offered without compensation, which elevates Olah, a reconciling sacrifice, a zibach, and also a pouring out of the word, debar, a day for his day. Kara called out Leviticus 23:37. I think Yahowah was clear. Are you listening?